All right, time is 10 o'clock. Call meeting to order. And let's take roll call. Sean Emmerich. Sean, are you there? Hold off on that. Mr. Reinhardt. Here. Barbara Evans. Sean? I don't see her name. Dave Motley. Here. Diana Rose.
I'm here.
Doyle Williamson.
Present.
Mike Morgan.
Here.
And Robert Dane. Did I pronounce that? Robert Dane.
I'm on the line, Tony. This is Adrian Arriaga.
Commissioner
Arriaga.
is here.
And Trek staff, if you go around the table and say your name and department, please.
Denise Sample, Director of Licensing and Registration Services.
Chelsea Buckholz, I am the new General Counsel, Licensing.
Tony Slagle, Deputy Executive Director.
Carrie Lewis,
Barbara Evans.
Counsel, and I just had a birthday, so that's true.
Mark Forrest, Manager of Enforcement Services. Michael Malloy, Staff Attorney.
Jennifer Wheeler, Director of Education and Examination Services.
And Dr. Evans just dialed in. So you're there, Dr. Evans?
I'm here. Hi there.
This is Robert Dane.
All right. So we got Mr. Dan and Mrs. Evans.
Yes, yes.
Sean Emmerich, were you able to get back on the line? Okay.
Thanks everybody. I know I sent out several go-to-meetings, so it was a little confusing, but I'm glad everyone was able to navigate all that.
All right. Discussion of possible action to excuse committee members' absences, if any. I think the only one that's absent is Mr. Emmerich, but I think he's probably just having phone issues because he was on the line a second ago. Number 3, ratification of the minutes of the February 4th meeting. Entertain a motion to approve the minutes if there are no other changes to be made.
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes.
Motion by Steve, is there a second?
Did you read it?
Second for Mr. Morgan. Minutes aren't something you have to actually vote on, right? For ratification? If memory serves?
No.
Okay. All right. Are there any general comments from visitors on non-agenda items? If there are, please step forward and state your name. Not seeing any. Item number 5, reports from subcommittees. Start with standards of practice subcommittee. Mr. Doyle Williamson.
Did you want to?
Yeah, I was going to get it right after. Sorry. Mr. Doyle Williamson, report please.
Sure. We had met recently and were able to press through the rest of the considerations for discussion through the standards of practice, and we've set a second date, I've been thinking correctly, for later, and we will begin process of discussing each of those items to make determinations of changes for the new review.
Perfect. All right. Enforcement subcommittee. We have a chair for that one yet. Is that one? It's Diane. I think we made Diane. Oh, it used to be Brad. It used to be Brad.
Sean.
Actually, it used to be me.
I think Sean. Right?
Yeah. Actually, it used to be me, and then I made it Sean. Okay. So we'll wait here for Sean when he comes back on. Is he back on yet? Do we know?
Oh. Mr. Emmerich, are you on the phone?
Okay. Mr. Lord, do you know if the enforcement subcommittee ever met for any particular reason? No. And education subcommittee.
Yes, we met, and we'll be reviewing in a later discussion some of the changes we recommended for 209, 212, and 213.
Okay.
And also at a later point, also the legal and ethics update.
Perfect. All right. Also with item number 5, we wanted to go ahead, since we have new members, and reallocate the committees, the subcommittees. Want to see Mr. Reinhardt, are you willing to stay on as chair for the education subcommittee?
Yes.
Appreciate that. Doyle Williamson, are you willing to stay on as chair as the SOP subcommittee?
Yes.
Perfect, thank you. And let's keep Sean Emmerich as enforcement. That's right, you don't show up to get volunteers. And, all right, so for the members of that, Ms. Barbara Evans, would you be willing to stay on as on the education subcommittee?
Yes, sir.
Perfect, thank you, ma'am. Mr. Motley, do you have a particular preference, enforcement, education, or SOPs?
No, sir.
No? Okay. How about we get you started on SOPs, which is standards of practice, which are the rules that govern all inspectors. Figured that'd probably be a good way to get you in to know what's going on there. Miss Diana, do you have a preference?
No, sir, I have no preference.
All right, well, we need somebody to be on 2 committees. Are you willing to serve on 2?
Yeah, I can do enforcement and SOPs if you want me to stay on SOPs.
Perfect. That would be great.
You're welcome.
Let's see, Mr. Morgan, would you be willing to be on education subcommittee?
Yes.
Fantastic. That leaves Mr. Dane, public member. We have one on SOP. We have one on education. Mr. Dane, would you be willing to serve on the enforcement subcommittee?
Oh, absolutely.
Perfect. All right, we have our new subcommittee appointments.
Thank you, sir.
Item number 6, staff reports, administration and management services, please.
So we're going to kind of double team that, but before we get started, and I apologize if you did this, I was kind of in and out of the room. Did you talk about what we're going to do at the end of the?
Not yet.
Okay, so I'll just briefly talk on that. So one of the agenda items on the agenda today is the discussion of the updates to the legal and ethics book. Until that is approved by the commission, that information is proprietary, so we're going to take that item up last and in closed session. So we'll vacate the room, get people off the phone. The committee members will dial in a separate number, and we'll have that discussion after that. But I just wanted everyone in the room to know that that's how that particular item will be taken up. I've just briefly wanted to talk about the legislative process right now. Our sunset bill has passed through the Senate and is awaiting a hearing in the House. The House companion was heard already, so likely what will happen is the Senate version will be brought up in the House committee. It'll be substituted the House version will be substituted for the Senate version. They'll vote the Senate version out. As some of you are aware, the reason why we're attempting to do the rules the way we are for the education is the committee had asked that we go to the legislature for a legislative change to try to help streamline the licensing pathways. And at this time, they're not interested in doing that. They're focusing on sunset. So likely we'll, based on what the committee's decisions are, we'll try that next session to try to see if we can't clean that up. But as of right now, we're going to be making those recommendations by rule. There aren't any inspector-related legislation. There's several things that touch on what we do as a commission, but they're in various stages of either haven't had a hearing yet or have had one and they're pending. So not anything I think of any real significant import to you guys as license holders.
So can I jump in here
Oh,
for a second?
I might have missed something.
No, that's okay.
Okay.
No, this is in relation to there not being any legislation inspector related. That includes what we had all talked about
Thank you.
for many, many, many months, and that is recovery fund and getting some contractual liability limitation or exclusionary language in the insurance provisions, or the insurance provisions as we now had them. Just a forewarning or just kind of a question. That really, we've talked to the bill sponsor about adding things to the bill, and they're not interested in adding anything. So the only people that could actually lobby for this are the associations, and I don't know if if any of the associations have taken up that mantle, but as far as we can tell, they haven't. So where that's going to leave us, and we'll wait till the end of session like we said we would, but there will be a rule coming before you this fall dealing with everything that's been hashed out, so we don't have to go through that again. Defense within limits being okay, and contractual limitations on the actual part of liability insurance that's required by statute can only be done above the limit set by statute. And, you know, Chelsea and Tony will bring that forward at a future date with very fine-tuned writing, but I just didn't know if any of the trade associations, I don't even know if we have trade association people here, were pursuing that.
You mean you want to come back for that?
I may listen in just for fun.
And I believe, and I apologize, I don't have the statute in front of me. I believe that the language regarding the insurance is generic enough that we could actually specify by rule that it's
We
both
can.
GL and E&O
Right,
as well.
and
So can
we
do
had
that, too.
talked about that, so, but we were gonna see if there was any legislative change, but within the authority given in the rule, I mean, in the statute, I think we can address everything that was discussed.
Yeah.
Perfect. That's all we got.
That's all we got. Yeah.
Standards and Enforcement Services. Mr. Malloy.
Select new members, educate them. My name is Mike Malloy. I'm the staff attorney. I present a disciplinary report for every meeting. So how this report breaks out to be is the first page, which, well, that's what it is this time. It's where it says since the last inspection committee meeting. This would be the most recent discipline that we have done. And the subsequent pages after that is everything that we've done for the fiscal year of 2019. And our fiscal year starts in September. So there's 5 disciplinary actions since the last meeting, and those are presented there on the first page.
Can I ask you a question on one of them? The one on the bottom, dated April 1st. Reason being performed an inspection in a negligent or incompetent manner and correctly reported foundation not performing as intended. Can we find a way to expand the reasons there? Because when inspectors see that, because they look at a lot of these disciplinary actions as a means to correct things or fix ways that they may do things. And that's pretty ambiguous, and my phone started ringing off the hook as soon as that
What I
came
can
across.
suggest, instead of being very verbose, we could put a link to the order on the report, and then people could just click that link.
I mean, the link is, if you
you-
go to the website, the link is there.
Yeah, the link's already there, but if people want a direct link, we can provide that. Putting something like that, I mean, we keep it limited.
Yeah.
I mean, we've expanded this report over the years. I really think without having the order there, they're
Right.
just gonna have even more questions the more information you put there, so.
Okay. As long as they have a way to get to the
They
information.
can look up by the case number
Okay.
that's already on there, they choose. But if you want to put a link to it, that's a possibility as well. Now, advisory letters would not have a link. Only the formal ones that actually have an order.
Okay.
Well, with due respect, you're going to expect the inspectors to wade through a lot of information to try to understand what your judgment's going to be and why.
It's only a couple of paragraphs.
Well,
Most of them are two.
I
Can you
understand-
can you identify yourself for the
Stand
record?
up and identify yourself.
Sorry.
Randall Ryden for Capria, and I'm just saying, having just a link to the judgment and maybe the direct reason why, maybe just there. You're still gonna have the phone calls from inspectors. I'm just telling you what I think is, you're still gonna have the same scenario, even if you had that little link to the whole judgment. I think you're still gonna have the same outcomes.
I mean,
Inspectors calling up and saying, hey,
to get this form, you have to go to a link to open this form up.
I understand.
Same link, you could go straight to the page. I mean, it's one click either
And
way.
inspectors are busy too, right? Are they all gonna read all this stuff?
No, when you get
Right.
the advisor, it's the first thing we usually do is go down the advisor and hit the link on
Disciplinary.
disciplinary actions.
I
And
agree.
you search for the ones with inspectors to see if there's anybody you know. I mean, that's the real- that's the real life. And then that comes, I mean, that doesn't come up, but what comes
Does
up.
it always make sense of the action, what caused it and what was the result? And why do we have to understand what, does it make sense?
Well, I think one thing, and this is true for all the agreed orders that enforcement does, whether it's inspectors or real estate folks or brokers, they're all fact-specific cases. So if you read the order, you get more of a sense of the specific factors that were in play for that particular case. And that's why I think Mike suggested reading the order, and most of these orders are no more than 2 pages, and the fact part is usually a paragraph. It would give them a better sense of what happened here and what they should avoid to do.
I mean, it does. It gives you everything from when they were licensed, when the inspection took place, the inspection address,
Right,
and the allegation, and then the results of the investigation,
right,
all in less than that right there.
right.
And what you don't find, which most of us question, is how they got between the allegation and what they found. I mean, because the allegation may be something that's either out of the scope or they determined was not an issue, and then you see it was a DBA and they used the wrong form, all the things that were discovered during the investigation. And some people don't realize, you know, what, and then it says the complaining person, and you look at it and you go, well, how would the client have known to complain about the form number? Well, he did.
He did.
He
It
complained
just came
about
up.
this,
Yeah.
and that was not, it was ruled as not an issue. And that's usually the biggest question, is how did they come up with, you know, who was it that complained and found, you know, something so obscure that a client wouldn't have known?
Well, this one's kind of unique because the person in question used a level, determine,
Yeah.
elevations, which is something that's come up in previous meetings that we had with the Board of Engineers, as far as determining whether that's,
Yeah.
so. Yeah. Okay. Anything else, Mike?
Yep. No.
I mean, did that answer
Steve-
your question?
Steve filled in what I was actually gonna say.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's great.
That works. Any other questions from Mr. Malloy? All right. Education Subcommittee. I'm sorry, yeah.
So,
Education and licensing.
something you'll notice on this is there are 2 separate reports, one for licensing and one for education.
Departments have split.
They've split, and when I prepared the agenda, I didn't make note of that. But I wanted everyone to know there's now a licensing and registration services division and an education and examination services. So,
Siblings, that's good.
yes, so,
So the first report is the one you're accustomed to seeing, the L1A. This is Denise Sample, the Director of Licensing and Registration. The L1A report still shows the number of applications received, broken down by application type, licenses issued, and this is through February, fiscal year to date through February. And the renewal activity. The format of this report has not changed. It still pulls up fiscal year 2017 year-to-date information to compare the same population of license holders.
But the number on those renewals from 19 to 17, which in theory should be the same round of inspectors, that's substantially lower than it was. That's almost half.
Which one are you looking
Where
at?
are you?
At the very renewal activity, that very first line, professional inspector renewals and percentage, in the last segment,
Yeah.
where you have fiscal year 2018, last year, 19 this year, and then 17, which is the 2-year cycle before. So apples to apples, you got 414 to 790 on fiscal year to date. And that comes across that, I mean, unless that's, 790 was the total for the whole fiscal year, but it says year to date, so that's what I'm wondering. Was that fiscal year to date as of year to date, or is that the whole fiscal year 2017? Is that 790?
I can look into that and get back to you guys on
'Cause
that
otherwise-
information work to confirm that that's where it's pulling from.
Because otherwise the percentages are wrong.
percentage, Right, well, the percentage is out of available license holders or license holders eligible to renew that expire in that month or that time frame. So I can find out if it's, the population has changed or if it is pulling the whole 2017 as opposed to just through February.
Because otherwise it looks like half our inspectors are going, not renewing.
Right.
Okay.
I can get clarification for you on that.
Okay.
If there are no other questions, the next report is the L2, and that also has not changed. It is the total number of license holders and registrants. And the middle section of the report is where you'll find all the inspector numbers. And through February of 2019, we've got 4,085 total inspectors. That includes active and inactive. If there's any questions, that concludes the reports for licensing and registration.
Any questions? Education and Examination Services.
All right, this is Jennifer Wheeler, Director for Education and Examination Services, and I'll pick up here, beginning with the L3 report, which is a year-to-date comparison for overall licensing examinations. You'll see in 2018, we had a total of 13 examinations passed for real estate inspectors and 281 for professional inspectors. 2019 year-to-date, 6 examinations passed for real estate inspectors and 205 for professional inspectors. If you look down at the bottom, you'll see the first attempt pass rate, which in 2018 was 35% for real estate inspectors and 46.7% for professional inspectors. Same information for 2019, 13.3% pass rate for real estate inspectors and 46.1% for professional inspectors. So, any questions?
That's a big drop.
Just for the real estate side.
Well, for the real estate side,
There's
and
not many
keeping
of
in
them, but
mind the
still.
number of,
Yeah.
of applicants
90%
that,
of them are professional, and it's like 0.5% difference. I mean, it's
right,
still
I
very
think
poor.
Denise's report showed that we have 3,600 approximately active professional inspectors versus 100 plus real estate inspectors. If there are no questions, I'll move on to the instructor report. Okay. That is the L4. The bottom portion is the instructor distribution information. You'll see, I think we're pretty steady. Back in February of 18, we had 39 CE elective only instructors. We have 35 now. Qualifying and inspector CE electives, 120 a year ago and 124 today. The SOP legal ethics update instructors, again, 55 a year ago, 54 today. And the most significant increase you'll see is for the ride-along course. A year ago, we had 65 approved instructors, and today we have 75. Any questions? That concludes my portion of the report.
Would this be a good time for me, Tony, to talk about approved inspector changes? I mean, instructor changes in general from ESAC?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so I'll jump in on this because we had an ESAC meeting this week. Well, actually, the Sunset Bill, as many of you know, recommended that TREC no longer approve instructors. And that is going forward. We did ask that we have the authority to maintain standards for instructors, and this would be both for real estate and inspectors. At the ESAC meeting, we proposed, or ESAC recommended proposing changes to the provider rules. Remember, we took all providers and instructor rules for all license types, and they're under F and G now, subchapters F and G. So we took what was an approval rule and changed it into a qualifications or criteria rule. Everything else stayed the same. It's just that the providers are going to be the ones who make the decision. And then we will have a program, an audit program that we're developing to make sure that that is being followed. So just a heads up, it does affect inspector. I mean, affect providers of inspector courses. They now have the responsibility of making sure that the instructors meet the criteria that TREC has had in place.
So that, the requirement to teach the class hasn't changed.
Right, no, that hasn't changed. It's just up to the providers to make sure, and they've had the responsibility all along to make sure that whoever's teaching the course is qualified in the subject matter to teach the course. That hasn't changed, but just kind of checking the boxes of what the minimum standards are, that's now going to be the provider's responsibilities. And they were all at the ESAC meeting, they're all aware of it, and it's a sunset directive, so.
And nothing changed on the classes or the providers being approved, just the teachers.
That's
Right.
correct.
Right, just the instructors,
So
just
the
the
classes
approval
are
of
still
instructors.
approved, the providers are still
Correct,
approved?
correct. And Sunset just thought that was one extra step that was unnecessary time and money.
So across the board, all
Across the board.
instructor, is there an effective date you're looking at?
That's, the effective date is gonna be probably this,
Probably January 1.
September 1st is when the bill.
oh, it's gonna,
effective date.
for the instructors, you're right, it's gonna be September 1st. That's why we're gonna be bringing it to the commission in May, so it can get approved in August, so it'll be effective in September, because that's when the bill's gonna be effective. The courses that you're gonna be talking about in a few agenda items, that will probably be
Yeah.
after January.
But come 1 September,
We will not be
Qualified.
approving instructors anymore, that will be the responsibility of the provider.
but the same standards will
Yeah,
apply.
Same
so,
standards.
so case in point, I think for certain courses, they have to be the same eligibility as being able to sponsor somebody. That would still be the requirement to be an instructor. We wouldn't license them, but they would have to still, the providers would be responsible.
And
for
you'll see
ensuring.
you'll see that in the proposed rules at the May meeting. And if you guys want those to come back to your committee also to see what comments, if there's any changes that might be appropriate
That would
at
be
that
good.
point. So put that on their July agenda.
But it includes MCE classes, everything.
Includes, it's both qualifying and MCE, and Tony will talk about it in a little bit with what's going on after your presentation on the qualifying courses, that we may need to make an adjustment to the CE course for ride-along instructors. That would be the only little group that would be back to what it originally was, how many years ago when we started it.
Fine.
So we won't even have ride-along instructor certification or nothing.
No, that would
Well,
probably
Sponsor.
just be a certification on the form that they signed, that they have this experience to be able to do it.
And sponsoring the same thing? There's no sponsoring?
No, they're sponsored, this doesn't impact
This
sponsor.
doesn't
I mean,
impact-
so we're
it's-
using
it's-
that threshold to
Still the
be a
same
sponsor.
standard. It'll be the same
will be
standard. The only
used
thing that's
for-
gonna change is how it's presented to
Right.
us, and if it's an actual class, the providers make sure they meet those same standards. No standards have changed.
Right.
So anybody could go work for a provider, and you guys, TREC still regulates the providers and the courses
Correct.
themselves.
Correct.
And it's up to the provider to qualify the instructor based on those criteria. But you
Right.
don't- The instructor itself doesn't have to go get their individual instructor.
Correct.
Right.
Because we
Right.
did
Correct.
get, was there, when we submitted, I guess we used, years ago, it's been so long, submitted to be a sponsoring inspector. That was a certification that required us sending in a log of the 200.
And
That
that
goes
has
away.
not changed.
Oh, we still have to send that in?
For
to be a
sponsors,
sponsor?
sponsoring
Yes, that's,
provisions
those
haven't
requirements
changed.
have not changed.
So you still got to turn them in, you just won't get you are a certified sponsoring inspector.
No, you
I think
will.
the
It's just
difference
nothing to do
is
with-
between the instructor and the sponsor.
Yeah.
Oh,
We're
There-
still
Okay.
sponsoring, it's instructors we're not gonna
Right.
have the authority to license anymore. So you're still, all the sponsoring rules and all those requirements are still the same. None of that's changing. It's just, we used to use that as a surrogate for certain qualifications for instructors, but those qualifications will still apply to the instructor. We're just not licensing them anymore. It's up to the provider to determine if they may meet those requirements.
Now, if you're a provider, you just have to keep up your provider license in your courses. But if you don't have to send in a separate application to be an instructor or people that instruct for you.
and if
You're
I-
responsible as a provider for them.
And if I want to hire someone to do ride-alongs, could I query Trek to see if he's meets the qualification of sending in the 200? Is that kind of the standard to be a ride-along? Is because we had made the ride-along somebody who's qualified to sponsor.
Right.
Right.
So if somebody comes up and says, hey, I want to teach some ride-along, in lieu of just having him raise his right hand and say he's done 200, would I be
Right.
able to query Trek and say, does this guy have 200? Is he qualified to sponsor?
I think you could ask
I
if they're
think-
currently identified as a sponsor
Yeah, I
in our
think-
system.
Will that still be on the website? Because I think,
I don't see why it wouldn't be.
Right.
Because that's not just solely for instructors. That's for people who want sponsors to look at
Right.
that.
so they would be,
Yeah.
yeah, so that.
So we
plays
just
on
keep
the
that
website.
same standard, and
then
then
you can
providers
verify.
can go look on the
You
list.
can verify that on the against that list of if that's still the qualifications to go
Okay.
forward, which it should be. But
That answers any other questions I have?
Okay, that was just, I mean, it's out there, it's happening, and it will come back before it gets adopted for you guys to look at the granular detail as to your instructor standards, but we haven't changed any, so.
we'll bring it forward to the education subcommittee meeting, and then we'll bring it also forward to the full committee meeting at their next meeting. The rule changes.
I mean,
as you sign them.
it makes sense along with the sunset clause.
Right.
And I think providers understand that.
Right, it's in the bill, we have to follow the law,
I
so.
think it simplifies it. If only we
And it
did it
does.
sooner, because I have to send my instructor,
Sure.
application in next month.
Sure.
Because they're all about to expire. Now I won't have to do that 2 years from now.
Your check is good for 90 days.
Apparently. Yeah. Mr. Regan.
Scott Regan, Texas Real Estate Education Training. I have one question on that. So as a provider, the standards of practice and legal and ethics, you're not going to require them to be more an advanced instructor? It's going to...
Those standards are still the same, and for the mandatory CE classes,
Yes.
for on the real estate side, because we don't do this on the inspector side, you will still have to do the train the trainer and pass that.
That's what I wanted to ask.
Yes.
Yeah, so
That
that's still...
standard, that standard is still there.
Okay, that one, all right, I just want to make sure.
Yes.
Thank you.
Good question.
So, legal 1, legal 2 on the agent side, broker responsibility, all those are still going to have trainer courses.
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. Item number 7, discussion and possible action regarding proposed amendments to 22 TAC 535.206, the Texas Real Estate Inspector Committee.
Okay, I'll start on this one, I guess. So, when we were doing the process of interviewing prospective new members of the committee, we discovered that when the committee had initially instituted term limits, that when the rule review in 2014 went forward, that particular provision got removed. So we're bringing this back forward to the committee to see if it is in fact something they wanted to consider to keep going. I mean, it was a mistake, so we assume you did, but I don't want to, it's not in the rule now, so this would be an amendment. To have inspector members serve no more than 2 consecutive full terms, which are 6 years, and the public members not serve more than 3 consecutive full terms, which would be 2 years apiece, so a total of 6 years. That's changed, as well as moving the date of the expiration to January 1st, and also moving the meeting.
31st.
I'm sorry, what did I say? January 1st,
Yeah,
January 31st,
31st.
and moving the meeting at which you elect your officers to January, because that always seems to be an issue bumping up against the commission meeting, because the commission meeting in February is typically early. So this will give the committee more leeway to do that and prior to the committee meeting. So I don't know if anyone had any questions. This is a proposal, and then making a change, conforming change, executive director to administrator, from administrator to executive director.
On B there, the second line, expiring February 1st, but then below it you change it to January 31st. Should you change that above as well? Second line of B?
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, that right there.
Yeah.
Needs to change as well, yes.
Okay.
Right? Carrie?
Yep.
Okay. Good catch.
So the new members would start February 1st,
February 1st. Yeah.
but we have to have a meeting in January to give our officers and everything?
Right, instead of February always complicated things, because with the timing of rules and stuff going before the commission.
Absolutely. But in
it's
that
just-
February meeting, our new members were there at the February meeting. The new members, in theory, would not be there at the January meeting because they're not technically part of the committee yet.
Right.
So we're picking officers without the new members.
True.
Okay.
Although,
So it's the outgoing officers who are choosing the.
you know, there's pros and cons to that whole situation. You want somebody who's experienced and understands, and then the people who are on the committee know the people, where somebody new would have no clue. So,
So we pick officers in January, we pick subcommittees at the subsequent
yes,
meeting. is basically
sure.
how that would work.
I think that would probably be a good
Is
plan.
there anything that kind of forces the hand of Trek of getting new members known and assigned before that January meeting?
Well, the only problem is you could do that. I mean, it's just
I mean,
planning
because we've
ahead.
run into that a couple of times where our
Right.
meetings and we still don't know, they haven't been interviewed or something like that. There is no
Right.
date or like trigger that we
It's
need to-
it's just an internal
Yeah.
process that just needs to be scheduled out. But you can't have, you could have, like, you know, nominated, and they could listen, but they couldn't vote.
No, I mean, but do we need, we would like to know who they are
What if we,
by
what
the
if,
January meeting.
what if we came up, and I'm just asking the two attorneys that I'm flanked by, what if we came up with a policy specific to the inspector committee spelling out how the nomination process and all of that,
Sure.
like a time frame, so
Sure.
that there's something that we actually have set that we follow in terms of when the interviews would start, when we would seek applications, all of that stuff.
Who does the interview, all
who
that
does the
stuff.
Because right now,
interview.
it's kind of a
It's ad hoc right
stepchild.
now.
It's like,
Yes.
when time comes, it's like a savings account. When we have time, we'll work on that. And it's like, it really needs to be a standard, like cut off by this date. The election
Yeah,
committee
I mean,
has a date
no-
by
no
him.
problem.
Chelsea and I could work on something to bring back to you guys to review for that. That would be it.
Because the last couple of times we've had our meeting in January, February,
We don't know who they are.
we
Right.
still are kind of
Still didn't have it
clueless.
then, right, I
Yeah.
understand.
I mean, they're not, they're,
Even if it was just a,
As a
Here's
prospective
the-
committee member, it would be nice, like when I first started, to be able to come to a meeting, even if though I'm not technically a member yet, to at least go
Here-
and know what's, kind of get an idea of what's going on before my first meeting. I'm here and I got to vote on stuff.
here's the issue though, is that they're appointed typically at the February meeting by the commission chair. So, because of when the terms end.
what if we know who they are? in
But you
January, like-
don't know until the commissioner, I mean, it's the recommendation from the interview committee that you want these people, but the chair could decide that for whatever reason, they don't want to. It's not likely,
Historically,
but
I don't know in my 9 years I've ever
Well,
heard of that.
it's not a statutory thing, so could we not recommend to the commission to appoint those at their November meeting?
but then you
That's
still,
pretty
you're
early.
all, with the problem is you're always gonna have an issue with when the term ends and when the next commission meeting is. There's always gonna be a weird kind of overlap there.
What you could do, and this happens with ESAC, okay, just if we want to make it parallel, ESAC has their term end at the end of December, and they are appointed in November.
I mean, I just think from
The ESAC role,
a new committee
I believe.
member, if I know I'm about to
I'll
get
check that.
thrown into this, and, you know, we volunteer for it, granted, but if I'm gonna get thrown into this for the next 6 years, I don't want my first meeting
Well-
to be thrown into the mix. I'd like to at least have kind of a warm-up meeting, and the existing
Yeah,
committee members
it'd
would
be
probably
nice
like to know who they are.
But it was going on. But I like your idea, if ESAC already has something,
Well,
because
I'm gonna
our,
look up, I'm pretty sure that's what ESAC
because we're
is.
usually on a biannual,
Like beating up
you know,
on
it's
your
every
computer.
2 years,
You
but
do a
you end up,
search.
Still counting down the minutes.
I know.
I mean, like the guys, the members coming off are still attending the January or maybe February meeting, when actually, I mean, and that's the highest.
Yeah, it's December
absentee.
31st. It's December 31st on ESAC, so we could have it be parallel to that.
And they're appointed in
And they're
November?
appointed in November, with
So they're
their
appoint-
terms to begin January 1st.
And so the outgoing members end December 31st.
Correct.
And the incoming members come January 1st. Yeah, we could.
And for all intents and purposes, they meet in October and January, just like this committee. So there's really no meeting in December, but the appointment happens in November and the terms just switch over between the meetings.
Well, and
Maybe
by-
that's cleaner.
And by the time that goes to the commissioners on November,
Yeah.
we already know who those prospective appointees are going to be, so they could come to our November meeting.
Well, you don't have a November meeting, it's
Or in
October.
October, yeah.
So, I mean, it would be between,
Right.
and then by the January meeting, they would all be there.
But if we
So-
make that consistent, I think it's great. But if we can give a new member at least an opportunity to come to a meeting first.
So,
without being thrown into
do
it, that'd be
we
good.
want to change it to December 31st is when?
Yeah.
I mean, why couldn't they be
And the
appointed in
commission-
November and start February 1st?
And the commission may
there's-
like.
Well, we'll start in the
the idea.
January meeting is what they do.
Yeah, because we have meetings in January. The February meeting, that was,
But we just changed it. So.
yeah, that,
That was a carryover from.
it was a carryover from a long time ago and it never worked well.
Yeah.
Let's fix it.
Might as well.
And if it parallels the commission
ESAC, so
and
then-
ESAC,
Yeah, I think that,
commission would like to do all that at once.
sure.
I'm just trying to assess. Okay.
I always thought that February, January, having 2 meetings that quarter just to
Right.
elect, and sometimes we had to do it
Right.
on the telephone. It's very confusing.
Hey, Lee, I have a question.
Yes, go ahead, Diana.
I wanted to ask, has there ever been an opportunity for inspector members to serve more than 2 consecutive full terms in the past? Has that happened yet?
Just Fred.
I think he was the last one, actually.
Yeah, I mean, no.
He
it-
was the last one to do it.
Yes, it does say 1, and then we've kind of selectively had gone to 2 6-year terms a few times. Myself and Lee are both
Yeah.
in that category.
Yeah, 12 is what the term limits are. So there's 6-year terms, but 2 consecutive terms.
Lifetime terms went out with Fred.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Fred. you just-
Okay, so that hasn't happened in a long time.
No.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure, because I was curious about that and whether we should, whether if that's going to happen again, whether that should be spelled out as a possibility, and then that would be up to the real
is.
estate commission as to whether that gets waived or not. But I
is.
guess
It
we don't
is
plan
in the
on that to
standard.
happen.
Yes.
Yeah, it isn't here that you can't serve more than 2 consecutive full terms. So that does leave the possibility that if somebody gets appointed to take over a term midway, that is not considered a full term, and in theory, they could be there for more than 12 years, but that's a really hypothetical situation.
Like the president.
Okay, I was just curious.
And I'm assuming that in item N, or line item N, where it says you change the date from 2019 to 2025, it's because in the current review, they're doing a 6-year instead of 12.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, so we're changing this to December 31st. I think that's the only change that this needs, right, Carrie?
Correct.
Okay.
And then the year, as Lee mentioned, is to parallel sunset term
Oh.
for the commission at the very bottom.
I'm
That's
sorry.
right.
Yeah, thank you. I didn't even get to that point. I apologize. Yeah.
All right, so that's it with the changes, right?
For this particular rule, yes.
Okay. So that's item number 7. So we entertain a motion to approve as amended, the current amendments to 535.206.
This is Barbara, I'll move.
Motion made by Barbara Evans. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Reinhardt. Any other discussion on this item?
Nope.
No other discussion. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, say no. Motion carries. I know, I'm trying to do it. Give him a little bit of time. Item number 8, discussion of possible action regarding proposed amendments to, and we'll start with A, 22 TAC 535.209 examinations.
Okay, I'm gonna start on these, and if you're okay, I'd like to take them out of order and start with 212.
Certainly.
Okay. Y'all have probably more context to these rules than I do. I know they were discussed at the last meeting. Because I am new, I am getting up to speed, and this has been a great opportunity to learn. So at the time you last looked at the changes to education and experience requirements, there was an expectation or a hope that there would be changes to the law. Because that it will not happen this session, we hope they will happen next session. We are working with a square peg, round hole scenario. So there are some interesting pieces to the rule that we've drafted, and it's because of that square peg round hole issue. So on 212, that's really the meat of the changes, and we are proposing to repeal that rule and replace it entirely. And the reason for doing that is just that there are so many changes and to make it cleaner. The intention of that rule is to put all of the experience and education requirements in each section for the applicable license type. Rather than having to kind of hunt throughout the rule to find all of the necessary requirements. So the first part of 212 outlines the sponsored experience and education for real estate inspector license. And that has a 90-hour education requirement that includes building science module 1 of 40 hours, building science module 2 of 40 hours, and a business operations and professional responsibility module for 10 hours. That equals 90 hours. And then it also continues to have the requirement of being licensed as an apprentice for 3 of the last 12 months, completing 25 inspections, and passing an exam. That has not changed. For the what we're calling traditional or sponsored well, and I should stop there
I have a question on that.
Please.
Because on that A, this is for real estate inspector.
Yes.
If you look at the end of number 3, it says and. So because it says and, someone has to have been licensed as an apprentice inspector on active status before they become a real estate inspector?
In these sponsored
on this track.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So there are 2 tracks for each. There is the sponsored, or what we until Friday we're calling kind of the traditional track, which is apprentice to real estate to professional. There is a substitute the experience track that we'll talk about.
Which we have to do by statute.
That's right. Yeah, you're exactly right. So building off of the requirements for the sponsored education and education for real estate inspector is the additional requirements for the professional license. And so that is the same 90 hours of education plus 20 hours of a Texas law module, and then also a Texas Standards of Practice module for 20 hours. Both of those.
24.
Oh, 24, you're exactly right. We changed that on Friday to 24 hours. So that equals 130.
114.
100.
It's 134.
134
Friday, we
hours.
didn't make that change to
We didn't
one.
make
Didn't make that one
Yeah,
change.
that's what we were talking about before tonight. We
Yes.
didn't do the total number yet.
Thank you.
What has not changed from that section is also the requirement to be licensed as a real estate inspector for 12 of the last 24 months, complete 175 inspections, and pass the exam. Good? Okay, so by law, we are required to have a substitute for experience track, as I call it. And so for that, we move to section D, right? And so for that, we do the exact same hours we've done ahead, which is the building science module, 40 hours. Building science module 2 of 40 hours. And these are the coursework and the modules that y'all talked about at your last meeting, I believe. We've changed some of the language, or some of the titles, but it is in the concepts that y'all discussed last time. Is that right, Jen? Yes. Okay. So, so you've got the 40 hours and then another 40 hours of the 2 building science modules. The business operations and professional responsibility of 10 hours, plus standards of practice interactive. Is that 20 or 24? 24.
Changed to 24.
And then the Texas practicum of an additional 40 hours. That was the recommendation of the education subcommittee on Friday. Before Friday, it was 20 hours, so that's a change to 40. And then also the passage of the exam. Similarly, the substitute for the professional inspector license looks very much the same, but we add 20 hours for the analysis and findings and reporting module and a Texas law module of 20 hours. Additional changes we're specifying that you do not have any duplication of courses. One of the sunset requirements really is that we not require anyone to take the same course more than one time to get to the next qualifying rounds. We have that. And we've also removed the should I say, alternative track to allow other professionals to be licensed, like engineers. There was a track for that that I think is very not used very often at all. That we have
Very ambiguous. Yeah.
yeah. So that's 212. What do I miss, Tony?
Nothing. Carrie's going to look up something because I think one of the things we may have jumped the gun on is under the sponsorship method for professional. I think we're limited to 130 hours. So if we bump the standards of practice module up to 24 by statute, I think we are, then it's 134 hours, which is she's just looking right now to make sure that that's not the case.
I thought it was a minimum.
No.
Well, it depends how you read it. It says that you have to have a real estate inspector's license, so that's your 90. And submit evidence satisfactory to commission a successful completion of at least 40 classroom hours of core real estate inspection courses in addition to the hours.
It says at least. It says at least.
Then
So
we're good.
yeah, I think you're right. Okay.
We're good.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure. So.
Yep.
Okay. Thanks.
So that's the total changes to the new rule 212.
Lee.
I have a question. Hello, sir. Roy Carter, Director of Inspector Education for Champion School of Real Estate. Under the D for number 2, complete a total of 130 hours. Is that number correct?
We just changed it to 154. I just changed it to 154.
Thank you.
We realized when we talked about this stuff on Friday, the one place we forgot to make the conforming changes was in that with the total number of hours. So.
So it's 154, and then in the section above it, is that section B? We changed it to 134.
134. It's 90, 134, 154, 194.
Mr. Regan? No?
No, I was with him because that's what we're.
Yeah.
Sorry.
This doesn't
We're not
matter.
passing notes, but
Remember, guys.
we're looking at each other going.
Calculators were smoking over there.
Yeah.
All right, so that was 212. Any other comments or questions on 212?
Yeah, I do. I'm sorry.
Yep. Okay.
When
Stand
the
up,
changes
say your
that-
name.
I already did that one.
Every time.
Scott with Tree. Under the new rules that you're trying to do under licensing, real estate inspector is going away, is that correct?
No,
No.
this is, because, and what Carrie addressed earlier is there appears to be lack of support or someone at the legislature that would actually introduce a law that would do this, because this is legislative, that
So we're gonna
it
do
appears
it.
we're gonna have to work under the umbrella of the law and form our rules under that umbrella of the law. And we're doing that, if you don't have a good picture of the incentive here is, there's very little incentive to do the real estate inspector because you have to do just about all the training as a professional.
Plus 2 exams, right? You got to take an exam once as a real estate inspector and then again.
So there's a monetary saving by just going, most of them, and I know the term fast track kind of is.
We say substitute.
Substitute. There you go. So the substitute path just adds some of the things. I mean, it really is the most popular way.
Already today.
92%. I think it's 92% of the licensees are going to substitute to professional.
Yeah.
So we're staying with 3 different licenses.
So they're there,
For
but
now.
one of them is kind of like,
It's almost obsolete.
it's kind of like my thyroid, taking thyroid medicine. It's there, but it's asleep and it's not doing anything.
Okay.
I mean, we can't take it away because the legislature says we have to provide it, but it doesn't say we can make it so much, I mean, it doesn't say that we can bring the professional down, bring the real estate up. We're adding the practicum, basically apprenticeship into the school, into the training, and
I mean, we currently have 3,200 actively licensed professional inspectors, and between apprentice and real estate combined, we have less than 300.
Yeah. 4%, roughly 4% are apprentice, 4% are real estate, and 92% are professionals, and they're going straight there. There's very few. A lot of my statistics on the people not renewing are people that are first and second term license renewals, and they're just figuring they can't cut it. Some of them, I mean, they barely got by getting their exam and getting their license, and they don't know the 70% that they got wrong is what they're doing in the field because they have no mentor. And they're not making.
So, in the ideal world, yes, we want to get rid of the real estate license because it's obsolete, it's not used, and it's just confusing to follow the pathways. So one of the reasons, but we're stuck with it because they won't change the law right now. We presented it to them, and they said, we're not interested in doing anything that's not in the sunset report.
Mandatory.
Right. But the interesting thing is the way this rule has been restructured, rather than having to go to A plus B plus C, and it's chunks. We put everything, even though we repeat it in places, everything you have to do for this type of license is here. Everything is in the next type. So you only have to look in one place, which I think will get rid of most of the confusion.
And then next session,
We'll try again.
We'll try again so that when we're not in sunset, it's a little simpler time.
Is it clear kind of how they look?
Yeah, it is, it's just,
I mean,
I'm over here going, why would you go that way when you can go this way, and it's only
Because we
20 more
couldn't.
hours.
That's exactly
my
my
whole
point.
Well, that, in most of the schools, I mean, in most of the people coming out of the schools, when I talk with them, they never knew there was an apprentice or a sponsor of real estate because they marketed the big package of do this and you can go out on your own and be your own boss. So they're only marketed that for the most part unless they really investigate. And in the past, when you went to the website to investigate, you were clueless. I mean, it
Very
was so
confusing.
complicated.
I'm agreeing with you on that.
Yeah.
Most schools, they only want to do one category.
The big package.
Yeah, and I understand that.
Yes, sir.
We had it both ways, but when they look at the two path, the catalog and the conversations with the counselors, they automatically jump down to this one. They say, this one I can do my own thing.
They don't
I
have to depend
worry-
on
I don't
somebody
have to
else
worry about
to
somebody.
sponsor.
If I had a falling out with a professional that sponsored me, then
I just wanted to be clear that we're keeping the three, but
We're keeping the three, but we're making one of them
More attractive.
more attractive.
And focusing on quality as opposed to quantity.
And the idea is to
Exactly.
try to take the reduced hours and not make it look like the schools can reduce the price. They enhance the quality and actually we've lowered the inspector or the instructor-student ratios, which some of the burden of reducing the hours might help offset some of that. And it would be nice to have passing scores above 50%.
And keep in mind, this was also a management requirement of the Sunset Bill that we get rid of redundancy in the education and track the national exam better.
I got you.
Well, I think in the end, we look at the passing rates a lot, and those are number, statistics that we look at. But in talking with inspectors that have gone through the courses and are now on their own, they're straight to the professional, they're lost. And they go out, and I get calls all the time from people, hey, I just passed my license completely on my own. Can I shadow you? Because I really don't know what I'm doing. And that's a concern. And I think the education subcommittee has done an exceptional job in reevaluating.
that's going to continue.
Oh, there'll always be some component of that.
It's always going to be that.
Absolutely.
Because you can't substitute the number of hours and years of experience we have with going through a course that is designed for 100 and something hours. So we all get it. They're always going to have it because they can't. I always say that the educational component of this is foundationally based, right? You still have to build the walls because you're moving into an educational profession. So they're always going to come to you or come to me or come to Steve and say, can I shadow you because I didn't get X, Y, and Z? Because there's no way that you can get X, Y, and Z when you focus on the exam and you only get them in a limited amount of time to get there. So to expect them to come out and be ready to roll without seeking help from y'all that are out there and me that are out there, I mean, that just will never work. Just will never work. We all needed help to get there.
It's not going to 100% fix it. I absolutely know it's not going to 100% fix it, but I think the diversity of what we're talking about in the education now at least gives a broader base to help a little bit, other than, I remember when I went through it was literally, I had a code book, and that was pretty much the bulk of my courses, going through electrical code, plumbing code, everything else. This goes through that, but I think it goes through business practices and a number of different things to help you get started to hopefully round that education out a little bit
I think
better.
we've added some.
Oh, yeah.
It used to be that way back when we first began. It was 128 hours, and it had business. It had all of these components that we're now going back to. So it's a good thing. It's a really good thing for streaming.
Would it benefit somebody just to kind of list them on the board and see how the 4 different tracks compare?
Right.
We did talk about, I think, flow chart on Friday. This is a whole lot simpler in concept when you
Yeah.
have a picture.
Can I give me a minute?
Sure.
I mean, it does make sense when you see it.
You're gonna show your whiteboard?
Yeah. It's not gonna be near as bad as the one I had Friday. But if you look at it, we've got the sponsored real estate inspector, and we've given them 90 hours, which we've always had. The training, we built it up to building module 1, building module 2, and then we've added a business one. It's only 10 because we're being sponsored. So you're still having somebody teach you that. We got the 12 months, 25 inspections, and then you pass the test. Didn't change a whole lot. We've reorganized the training into the building module 1 and 2 in the business to kind of align itself with the national exam. And then you got the sponsored professional inspection, which is 130 hours. Building module 1, building module 2, the business is the same there. We added Texas law because this one is, you got a few more questions that you will address in the exam. And SOP. And you have 24 months instead of the 12, and 175 inspections instead of 25, you have the test. Those are the 2 sponsored ones.
134.
34, yes. So those are the 2 sponsored. We don't have any practicums, we don't have any of that. You're getting the 25 inspections and the 175. If you go this route, you're doing 200 inspections with your sponsor. And you've been licensed for 3 years. You know, so, but it's not used very much. Everybody's over here where they're doing the
Substitute real estate and then
Substitute.
substitute professional.
real estate. Now here's where we do 130, is it 4? Plus the 40 of the practicum. But it's pretty much the same as the professional here. You're going to do the building module, building module,
154.
building, and then you got the Texas law. We've got that in there. So the only thing we've really added
The SOP there is,
the 40 hours of practice.
that's right, that turns into 154 hours. And the SOP module is different in that substitute. Instead of it being classroom work, it's experience. Interactive, there you go. Because of, they're
Because you're
not
not-
having
you're
the
not dealing with
experience,
the
right?
sponsor.
Well, the substitute real estate is 20 hours of practicum, not 40, right?
Hold on.
The substitute professional inspector is 40, but the substitute real estate is 20, right?
The practicum in both
It's
is
40.
40. For both substitute practicums are
sponsor-
40
so
hours.
Not what it says in D.
Isn't it? I thought it was 40.
Oh, we bumped it. That's
Yeah.
right.
It's been
Okay.
40, so it's the
Okay.
same. So you got the sponsor, you're training with a sponsor, minimum, but you have the same module, business, and with the professional, we have the Texas law and SOP. If you're substituting and you're not doing a sponsor and you're doing real estate, which is really weird, because once you do it, then you still have to find a sponsor, because you can't be on yourself as real estate. This might be one of the least used.
Yeah.
But there's a place for it. You've got a sponsor that's willing to take you on, but doesn't have time to train you. You could go this route, you get tested and everything, then they sponsor you. Can be used, maybe, I mean, it's just not, the most common is gonna be the substitute professional. This is where 92% of the guys go. It's 170 hours, the same.
194 now.
94.
Yeah.
94.
Sorry.
94, because we're adding in, well, it's actually 154 plus 40.
Yeah.
So it's 154 plus 40. No, I thought we added the analysis to this one.
It's 194 total.
194.
Yeah. And the RE is 154 total.
That's 154. Of the 154 is 40.
Yeah.
Right.
And this is 194.
Yeah, right.
Because we've added analysis and something else. Is there analysis?
Okay, so the total, 194, you have the two building modules, that's 80. You have the business operations and professional responsibilities, that's another 10, so you're at 90. Then you have analysis and findings reporting module of 20, so we're up to what? 130.
But that's kind of how it fills out, in the sense that the core, building module 1 and 2 and business go across the board. If you're substituting and you're not sponsoring, you get a 40-hour, what we call practicum, which is basically taking all this core classroom, and in this case interactive, and you're actually going out and doing some inspections.
I think if we can, once we get through all this and cross the T's and dot the I's, if we could put something on the website.
We're going to.
Website,
We're going to.
really lay that out.
We're going
Here are the
to. And
distinctions and
If you do
differences.
A, this is what you can do.
Yes.
If you do B, this is
That's
what you
exactly
can do.
what we're going to
I
do.
mean, so yeah, so if you find a sponsor, these are your two choices right here. If you're not finding a sponsor at all, this is your only choice right here. If you're going straight out on your own and you're never with anybody, the benefit of this new structured system is we've added this 40 hours of practicum, but the school, I mean, we couldn't require apprenticing per se in the school, so public member Bartlett came up with that big word that I hadn't heard before, practicum. Basically, it is any sponsorship in the school, you're gonna go out and do the test.
It's hands-on. It's just
It's hands-on.
field work.
But it's more, the intent is online, like doing a real inspection, not just little bit and pieces.
Right.
You're gonna start and finish and a report as if, because everybody knows, when you graduate, you get that license in the mail. All intents and purposes, you're on your own. And it would have been nice to have had a few of these inspections. Doesn't mean you can't still mentor with somebody, shadow with somebody. Smart thing to do, but the legislature requirement to do this because of the size of Texas and the availability of sponsors is just, although most of our people are within range, and the idea of getting a whole career in a month of sponsorship is amazing. You can't do it. But that's the idea, is to streamline it down. The real estate inspector, I think, is gonna be, we couldn't get rid of it, but you can see there's so little difference in the fact that you still gotta have a sponsor no matter what.
Take it test twice.
Yeah, and you're paying the 200 or whatever the cost is for the exam twice. The exam has a 5% better score requirement, I believe.
70 to 75.
Yeah, so you have a 5% better score, and you have a few extra questions, I think, that are in the bank for the exam. But that's without being able to get rid of the real estate, that's the best we can do.
No,
I think that answers some of this.
So if you're okay, I'll walk through the other two rules in this little package.
Okay.
Because they are absolutely a package. Okay, so I'm backing up to 535.209, and this is on the examinations for licensure. And the major change to this is basically to come up with found a mechanism to break up all of the courses required for the 4 tracks into what covers the national subjects and what covers the Texas specific. And then that also allows for individuals who would like to do so to take the national exam first, to basically take them separately, national exam before the Texas exam, to help improve the pass rate because of the distinctions between the two. So we have outlined what is considered the coursework for national versus what is considered the coursework for state. And then we've also added a provision that allows folks who are practicing in other states not to retake the national portion of the exam or the courses associated with that, that they are required to take the Texas courses and the Texas portion of the exam.
provided they have taken the national and those courses in
Yes,
their respective.
I think we put within the last,
And who knows that some states don't have, you know, they don't have licensing, but they may or may not have coursework that's equivalent to ours. And we just, I mean, I feel if you've been able to take the exam and pass it, that you should be able to step in at that point and just start with the Texas module, regardless. Because there's some states out there that mandate 75 hours of training, take the national exam, and we won't be able to differentiate them and say that you didn't learn enough, but you passed the test. Well done. So if they pass the test, regardless of where it came from, as long as it's, I don't know if we put a date, how old is a test can be? Because some
We
states you
didn't.
take
We
the
didn't.
test, the test has been around a long time.
Yeah.
I thought it said within the last 5 years.
There was something in there about 5 years, it was an odd date.
That was a duplicative coursework.
Okay, duplicate.
There you go.
Do we want to put in there that the exam doesn't expire?
right.
Most of the
Well,
inspectors in Texas have never taken it.
what do you think of someone who's been practicing in another state for 20 years successfully? They took the exam 20 years ago. Would they need to take it again?
No, I just brought that up because that was a
Well,
question.
and if we're focusing, if the requirement is, regardless of whether, how long they've been taking it, they still are required to take the Texas stuff and pass the Texas exam, there is still that
And practical.
particular, that particular aspect of it that they would need to go through.
I think we could say there's no expiration to the
I think
date.
as long as we're still requiring them to do the Texas side of it,
Yeah.
I think we're
'Cause
probably,
they-
I think we're still protecting consumers okay by making sure they're at the most up-to-date standards, better than.
I like,
Right.
once they get licensed, yeah. And it's the same whether you're an apprentice, real estate, or professional, it's the same CEs. A
Across the
number of
board.
CEs and everything, yeah.
Across the board.
Which some apprentices don't realize. They didn't think they had CE requirements because they had no requirements to get their license.
We've also done a little bit of cleanup. If you scroll down to G, to some of the language there, and really outlining that what courses can be taken in order to be qualified to take the exam again. Let's see.
Should you fail it at 3 times?
Should you fail it 3 times? There you go.
Yeah, we tied it directly to classes rather than hours, just because that makes more sense if we're going to go that route.
Any questions on 209? Okay, 213.
Okay, so 213 really outlines the specifics of the coursework, and I'm going to pass the conch to Jen for her outlining of this.
Okay, so
I think you should start with the math since we've had so much of the math conversation today, because the numbers don't add up.
Well, why the minutes don't necessarily add up to
Oh.
total hours?
Right. So there are some revisions that we need to make to the number of minutes assigned to each of the modules that are outlined here. But first, just to reiterate what has been discussed throughout this meeting, is that the intent was to more closely align the content of these courses to the national exam initially, to help better prepare our students, and hopefully the outcome of that will be higher exam pass rates. And then again, to more specifically define the Texas component and the Texas requirements for pre-licensing education. So, and that's what you see here with Building Science Module 1 and 2, representative of the NAHI exam components. Also, the analysis of findings and reporting module, and I think I just missed the business. Did I miss that, or is that later? No, I'm sorry. Yeah, so then is the business operations and professional responsibilities module. You'll see the number of hours that are assigned to each of these, and then you'll see a breakdown of minutes. We need to do take some corrective action on those breakdowns of minutes because they don't actually correspond to the number of hours accurately. So we're going to make that adjustment. As always, courses are made up of 50-minute hours. It's always been the same with qualifying, pre-licensing, continuing education across the board for real estate and inspectors. So when you see so for example, 200 minutes is 4 hours of coursework. So no change.
That's school math.
Yes.
That's called school math.
Yes.
Do you know what the changes are? Do we want to make them before they vote on the rules, or do we need to?
Is paragraph 8 corrected up there?
Paragraph 8?
Yeah, go to the last page.
Well,
Got 2 sevens?
No, it was corrected, and I forgot to make that correction. Thanks.
I think essentially all of the minutes need to be cut in half.
They're too long.
Right. But, and I believe I may have made those changes to my own document when we met on Friday, but they didn't get changed in here.
That's gonna make Jen sweat to do that this week.
Well,
It
that's
will.
fine. We can,
Can we just-
I mean, if when we get to the motion, we can just,
The ratio of breakdown is still there.
Well, just that they can be corrected, and keep in mind, this is just gonna be for proposal. It will come back
Right.
to this committee before
And
it's
that would be
adopted.
considered a non-substantive change, right?
Yes,
So-
and you could just instruct in your motion to, with minutes corrected as described by staff, and then staff can just take care of that. We don't have to sit here and do every minute calculation right now.
In this, we talk about assessing defects and issues. Do we want to use the word defects, or we want to actually use deficiencies just to keep the verbiage consistent?
That verbiage is all consistent with what's on the NAHI
NAHI,
exam
okay.
outline, and
Okay.
that we discussed that in Friday's meeting. And
It came up.
Fair enough.
right.
So it was cut and pasted.
so take
Fair
it
enough.
out of everything.
Okay, so I want to make sure it came from somewhere.
gonna be form
Okay.
approved.
Try to keep it as consistent as possible.
Just doesn't-
Anything else on 13?
Are you suggesting?
No.
Yes.
We were suggesting removing hereby adopted by reference, because if we keep that in there, we have to have the forms by the May meeting. If we take it out, then that gives the education subcommittee time to do them, and they can be adopted when the rules are adopted
Right.
in August.
The forms will still be approved or adopted by the commission. They won't just be adopted in the rule. We always in our meetings have a forms page where they can be adopted. And that gives a little more flexibility to the committee to work on them and get them done.
More time.
And more time, and get provider input and all that good stuff.
So
I know
we're
we
just
talked
gonna.
about that Friday.
Yeah, I thought
Was
we're
that
just,
in
we're
here?
just gonna take
It
out
just
the
says here-
adopted by
here-
reference.
Hereby adopted by reference.
That just
removing
needs to
that.
come out, so.
Yeah,
Where they at?
right here. So, see, hereby adopted by reference. So removing that.
It'll still be the form that's approved, so.
And that's the form we use whenever
Providers submit their courses for
So each
approval.
one of these modules will have its own approval.
It's similar to the layout of the ones we use now. It's just going to be a little longer.
It'll be a little different. It'll probably be more parallel to what they do on the real estate qualifying course.
It will be more parallel to that, but not too different.
Okay.
Do you have anything else, Jennifer, on 213?
I do not.
Mr. Harbuck, you wanted to speak on agenda item 8?
Yeah, I just had a few questions.
Can you stand up, state your name, please?
Yes, Stan Harbuck with ADSBI. I think something was mentioned earlier about January 1 being the effective date of this. Is that correct? Is that what we're looking at?
That
Or
would be
sometime
the,
thereafter.
Or
that
sometime
would be the
thereafter.
earliest.
That'd be the absolute earliest, yes,
And
sir.
that
Oh,
will
that's
be it,
fine.
yeah.
I'm just worried about having enough time for none of those final reports to come out.
And that's
courses.
why we're kind of accelerating this spring to try to get it
Okay.
to all the committees and then the time to get set up.
Yeah, no, that's good. And then I know some of the subtopics, some of the topics like mechanical exhaust that was added, it's not an HIE topic, so we don't have subtopics on that. Are those going to come out in the form, and what will they be?
All topics and subtopics will be on the form,
Okay, so,
but I'm not aware that we added anything.
Yeah, this was
That's
straight
not-
off of the,
This is cut and pasted
From
off of the NAHI outline, I thought.
the mechanical exhaust, I don't think that's in there. I think that was something that was added. But I could be wrong,
Okay.
but There's nothing in there on mechanical exhaust, if you look at the NHIE outline. I mean, I'm sure you could include that under heating and cooling, but it was listed as like a sibling of heating and cooling, so I assumed it was not in those topics.
I didn't provide anything to staff to add, to modify the NIE.
Okay.
Stan, this is Roy.
Oh, yeah.
This goes Bill State. It's a subpart that's under there.
In NHIE?
Yeah.
Oh, so they just made it a regular topic instead of
Yeah,
letting it be on, okay, that's good. And then yes, and I noticed a lot of, numbers, things that have to be done, and that's fine, I won't go through and talk about each of those, but, but it looks like the minutes on some of them, like building science module 1 and 2, that those minutes correspond to the hours, but they've had the breaks taken out of them. Is that right? So some of those numbers are good.
That's an education math I was talking about.
Well, okay.
50 minutes is really an hour.
No, and that's okay. I understand. I just wanted to make sure, and then you can correct the others later because they're
That's our plan.
good, excellent.
Promise.
The other thing is probably the students that get stuck in the middle. So all of us providers have students that are going through the current rules and regulations for their courses. I hate to see them sort of being told that, okay, you took a different curriculum and, and we have a 12-month grace period, I'm guessing, on this. Is that true, Carrie, for them? So,
If you're enrolled before the active date,
oh, okay, right.
It's made kind of like building code. Whatever's
Right.
effective when you enrolled is the course you grow on. Now, what we might talk about is, because we're reducing the standard, are we going to hold them to the 390 hours? If they sign up before the effective date, can they?
I guess if they could maybe sign up but not take the course, but that's a discussion to have. And that's a decision the students, as it gets closer, are going to make. I mean, we had the opposite thing happen, say with appraisers, when a college degree was required after January 1st, we had more applications in December than you could imagine, right? So it cuts both ways on these rules, but usually we look to the effective date as a cutoff date. And there's nothing to keep providers from advertising, if beginning January 1st or March 1st, whatever it is, this many hours, this is the package and this is the price. Whether the price goes up and down, that's totally up to the schools, right? But in terms of...
Can the school enroll them before January, knowing that they won't test until after January?
That's something that we'll have to look at and discuss, whether they can enroll them as long as they don't start taking the courses. And then again, we do have precedent with broker lawyer forms that you can have voluntary use 3 months after they're passed. So we could maybe look at the statute and look at some of that going forward, and that would be something that.
Because you don't want to hold. I can see somebody signing up.
As we
October.
talk about a transition, as we talk about adoption, a lot of that can be in the motion as well.
Okay.
Voluntary use are probably the best.
And that we with broker lawyer forms, for example, we do that in our motion.
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No.
You just brought up that question.
That's exactly what I was going to ask.
Transition will be considered,
Right.
and it'll be up to this committee. Probably at your July meeting, you'll talk about what's the best way, what are we going to recommend, how the commission adopts this. And that's when you'll talk about effective dates, that's when you'll talk about any voluntary and students, how we do that transition. But usually it's if you're in the middle of something, you're allowed to finish it. Whether the schools want to teach 2 course curriculum at the same time, they have to figure out their strategy on that.
It's just unique because we're going down in hours instead of increasing.
Right, so people might wait a month.
Well, we've added, the practice, somebody signs up in October, it doesn't have the practicum requirement.
Right, it's less but different.
Yes.
Which makes it hard.
But I think it
But
would be
total hours are
attractive.
more, quite a bit more.
So I guess
Currently.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I guess these transitional rules would have a lag time different than these rules because it won't be considered until the next inspection committee meeting. So they won't be.
These are just up for a proposal.
These are for proposals, so these comments could come in, and if they're less onerous, then they're not substantive comments. And also, a lot of these transitional things are done in the actual motion when the commission adopts them. effective dates. When commission adopts, they'll set the effective date.
Oh, okay.
Usually, and voluntary use, that's usually done by a motion.
Okay, so we're okay with that, and there won't be a lag for that,
We're
because
going to work hard to make sure the
Oh.
transition's
Yeah.
as painless as possible.
And I know that you've been all working very hard, and I really appreciate that. I know this isn't easy. It's a short fuse for doing so much all at one time.
Been wanting to do it for 10 years.
Yeah, that's
That's
right.
true,
Sunset
yeah.
just held your feet to the fire.
To do it
this
in a
time.
few months.
Well, it gave us some.
It's a perfect opportunity
It gave
to
us
go
some
into
incentive
Yep.
and some, some will to do it.
You've raised all the questions that I was going to ask. Like, this is the first time, and you've both mentioned it, that we're reducing the hours, not increasing them or keeping them about the same. So the rules, from what I can tell, are kind of designed so that we're assuming it's kind of equal, that it's about the same number of hours. But what happens, I'm afraid, is that, as it sounds like your concerns are there as well, these people take 300-something hours or more, and then now they just have one course left, or, it's cheaper for them to go with a new course instead of finishing the old one. I just would like to see us give them some credit for what they've done if we can.
But if they
somehow.
sign up before the effective date, they have the full time frame to finish the old course.
Oh, right, no, I understand, but see, now it's almost twice as many hours, you see. So, I mean, it was twice as many hours, so their incentive is going to be, why should I take the 200-hour course? But can I get some credit for the 100?
Well, and that's what we're going to
Okay.
talk about. So once this gets kind of to the point where we know it's not going to change, and we're talking about the implementation, that's where we're going to talk about the transition,
Okay.
where the schools might be able to bring those people in, and what they can do before the effective date.
Great.
And maybe by giving an effective and a
voluntary
transition
is
date,
going to be the way to do that.
then that allows them to start training under the new standard before the drop dead. Nobody can sign up under the old class anymore.
What
As
credit
long as
do
their
they get
courses
for
are
courses
approved.
they've already
Right.
taken and all
Yeah, I think the voluntary use will be the way we fix that, because not only that will hopefully eliminate most people getting stuck in the middle, but also prevent providers from having everybody sitting on their thumbs waiting for that new date to come, and then they lose out on business because of that as well.
Those that are able to get their courses submitted and approved
Can do them
ahead of time, yeah, that's a good thing to
You know
consider.
it's coming.
Thank you for considering them, and I realize that'll be down the road. I have a lot of other questions. I taught a curriculum very much like this for about 15 years, and I'm very familiar with some of the issues that come up.
And some of the schools that teach cross state lines, this is going to help too, because the modules are there.
Well, there are a lot of things about the practicum that I had, a lot of questions, and I don't want to belabor you guys for that in this meeting. I probably read them. I just would ask that you consider some of those, because this is almost exactly the curriculum that we taught for about 15 years live. So please consider those. I know they're not being considered now, they're not being added into the rules and so forth. But probably the most significant last question I have is, we have requirements for the mandatory CE for legal ethics, SOP update courses. And there also used to be a part of this curriculum for pre-qualifying. Are we now saying that those are taken out? Are we saying that they're integrated into these? Okay, so we're saying.
The information is absorbed into these other topics.
But those courses are specifically CE courses now.
Okay.
They're not going to be, or will be when this goes forward, because
Okay.
one of the sunset things is there's a lot of redundancy, and that was it. You had to take this qualifying, and then you had to take in CE and whatever, so now they're specifically focused on being continuing education.
Okay, good. So, excellent. Thank you for answering that question. That was a huge one. Thank you so much for all the great work you guys do.
Let me get through this one. Mr. Regan? No? You had signed up for all, so I want to make sure. Go ahead. Okay.
We're good in the back?
I appreciate that. Any other comments or questions on agenda item 8 for those three? Mr. Slagle?
Yes. So as Carrie mentioned, one of the things we did recently when we were reorganizing the rules was to move the ride-along the ride-along coursework to 213, because it was really part of the. While it was designed initially as a CE course, it was really part of the qualifying course. So we felt it fit better there. However, with these changes going forward, the committee needs to decide whether or not they want to continue right along for continuing education courses, and if so, we need to move it back to 218.
I like that. I thought about that.
Yeah.
Because we're doing practicum now, and it is strictly a continuing education thing.
It would be strictly, it would be what it was originally designed for, which was when that came forward initially, the thought was, there's some guys out there doing inspections that might need a little bit,
Get credit for it.
yeah.
They can get some credit for
Yeah.
that.
No, I don't
So-
see any problem with them
So
getting
just,
credit for ride-along.
just the ride-along
Just
package, just move it
moving,
back to.
moving
Back
everything,
to
move
where
it back
it
to
started.
218 the way it was prior to the change. So,
Don't cloud it
there's
up.
not a rule doing that. We would just propose that as part of the package for the commission if the committee was okay with that.
So this 13 is not, I mean, it's not in the 13 now.
It's in the current 13.
Yeah, so
Yes.
13
The change
is,
that was made several
This,
months
I
ago.
mean, what
13
we
is
have
also
here.
a rewrite, so it will be repealed and replaced, so
Yes.
you don't see it in those materials because what you
This
see
is
is
just
the
the
new. That's
yes,
right.
okay. But I
As
like
opposed to
that.
5 pages of red lines.
Right.
Right,
You know,
and
pages
crossed
of-
eyes.
yeah.
So we will take, if y'all so move, we will include that in this package to the commission.
moving the ride along back to a CE only course.
Fine.
As it was prior, which was it limited it to 2 people for continuing education, so.
And that is, in essence, what 213 does, so if you approve 213, that's just the natural,
Right.
natural.
You can find an old 213 that's still there.
You want to see
Okay.
213? I have a
No,
notebook
I've
of
got
it.
one.
Okay.
You put it on the whiteboard?
I keep all those.
We do. I've got them back.
But I can tell you just personally, I know how much you guys gone through this, and thank you, Steve, and the education subcommittee, because I know this is a huge bear to take on, along with staff.
She
and-
jumped in like waist deep.
Hey,
First.
That's a,
She did.
that's a perfect
Great
one to come in
learn.
on.
Yeah, now I
Perfect one to come in
I
on.
know about y'all's education requirements. This is good.
We're gonna take them all on a home inspection when we do Tony's
There we
house.
go. Any other comments or questions on agenda item 8? Hearing none, entertain a motion to approve as amended the free items within agenda item 8.
I make a motion that we approve 535, 209, 212, 213 with the corrections to the hours as presented.
Motion made by Steve Reihart.
Barbara, I'll second.
Robert was first on the gun to get the second.
Okay.
Any other discussion on agenda item 8? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed say no.
Aye.
Motion carries. If you don't mind, let's go ahead and, because we spent a long time on that, let's take a 10-minute break, and we will adjourn for 10 minutes at
Recess.
sorry,
Yeah.
not adjourn, sorry, wrong way. Take a recess at 11:34, return back at 11:44. The time is 11:44, we will reconvene from recess. We'll move on to agenda item number 9, discussion of possible action regarding proposed amendments to 22 GAC 535.220, professional conduct and ethics. Tony?
Yeah, this is you, Carrie, I believe.
Okay, this is the, you know, we brought up the subject of pay for play with brokerages, and so I have proposed through the executive committee, actually, a parity rule for real estate brokers and agents. And in doing so, kind of tracking what RESPA does, I came up with a couple of things that were missing from this rule. So I'm just making them both parallel. So there were a few settlement providers, settlement service providers as defined by RESPA that were not on this list from whenever this was created, pre-me. So I just put them in.
I like that.
And just so everyone on the committee understands that this is, so on the other side of things, a rule is being proposed to take care of this on the broker side.
And I'm using the same language in that rule.
So they have to play by the same rules.
Yes.
So we shouldn't see any of what we've been dealing with.
Hopefully not.
They can still, the whole goal here
You
is.
can still do joint advertisement and things like that.
Sponsorship, stuff
Right.
of that nature. The problem was, from the inspection side and from the title and other, service provider sides, it was against the rule for us to participate in those exclusionary type programs. But it wasn't on their side. They could solicit it, but it wasn't.
We couldn't accept it.
Right. So the pay or receive is now going to be on both sides.
Right. So now the
In
rules
these
apply to
particular
everybody.
instances, yeah.
They can still, you can sponsor lunches, stuff like that, but they can't, the goal is to prevent them from excluding people who don't pay to go in to their office, to be part of a program, to be able to go in, talk to their office, or do anything that everybody else can do.
It's primarily on the back of their continuing ed providers to make sure they know that change when it happens, because we know it.
Right.
Well,
Oh, no,
we'll
we're going to talk
also-
about, it's going to be in the legal
Yeah.
update.
I mean, we
It'll
will,
be in there.
And we will also,
We'll advertise it, we'll put it on our website, we'll make sure that.
and we will just leave it up to the
it's
providers.
big
We'll do-
banner on the website.
Yeah. So that rule, as this rule, with the few minor corrections, will be proposed in May.
Because this is something that didn't start with the, well, it's kind of started with the inspector, but there's a lot of settlement providers that have been asking for this for a long.
Mortgage originators, title
title,
companies, they
home
all
warranty.
want this.
I don't see it in my area, but I guess in the big cities.
See it everywhere. Everywhere. There's program, well, yeah.
Well, it's a big city. Competition.
It's become a revenue source for them, and it benefits companies that have multiple inspectors and big companies. They can, be part of those programs, but your sole proprietors, which most inspectors aren't, may not be able to, to do that. Plus, there's no qualifying for a lot of what these people are putting on their programs, so you're limiting the consumer choice.
Right,
in most
so,
ways,
so
too.
like I said before, to this group, to me, it's also a fiduciary responsibility issue as well as the RESPA issue.
Okay. So these are changes to our existing rule.
Yes.
To basically mimic what is on RESPA.
To make it complete, correct.
Okay. Anybody have any questions or concerns regarding this item? Entertain a motion to approve agenda item number 9.
I'll make a motion to approve the amendments to 535-220.
Motion by Steve Reinhardt. Do I hear a second?
I'll second that motion.
Second has been made by Mr. Morgan. Any other further discussion on this item? Hearing none. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, say no. Motion passes. Item number 10, discussion and possible action regarding proposed amendments to 535.222 inspection reports.
So this was an item that was brought forward based on some conversation that happened at the last inspector committee meeting about the fact that you guys are required to provide the report 3 days regardless of whether payment's been received for the report or not. But if you'll notice in the amendments here, part of that discussion was also that if you were going to tie it to payment, that it didn't need to be 3 days, it could be 2. So I just reflected that on here as well. It's part of the discussion whether you think it should be 2 or 3. But that's where this. So this would say that upon delivery of receipt of payment, that's when the clock starts ticking, and it's.
And it's still, unless agreed in writing. And
Unless
your
agreed in
amendments
writing,
correct.
right.
Yeah, it still leaves that leeway if you.
So for those of us that everyth's prepaid, all I did was lose a day.
Correct.
Unless I want to modify it.
And I think the discussion last time was that if you're paid for it, 2 days didn't seem that egregious in terms of providing the information.
And if it's, yeah.
So
I think it's kind of what we talked about before.
And this makes it very, very clear that payment for the payment for the report prior to
So
delivery
you
of the
could do
report.
contract, you could do the inspection, on Monday, you don't get paid till Wednesday, you
Clock
have until
starts with-
Friday.
Correct.
To deliver it, right?
Correct. But I think this protects inspectors, to make sure
Well, they always wanted some leverage to make sure,
Right.
it's like, you're gonna get it within 48 hours and probably within minutes of when the check clears. Yeah, and I get the check.
and then we also tied to the new definition of client.
And also, delivery is a readable, not just, however method you're giving it to. I can read
Readable as opposed to.
Some programs.
Well, it's a report. It wouldn't be an
Sometimes the
oral
reports,
report.
sometimes
the report's there, but it's not. You can't open it until
Yeah.
you've paid for it. There's
Like
some
a-
inspection software that's
So
there.
we-
it's there.
Use
I think-
ISN, but
I think we can maybe put. put something in the inside about that, just to clarify it, that that's what, based on this rule, that the delivery means they can see the report, it's not just a link to the
Accessible.
report. Accessible, yeah.
I don't think we need to say that, but do you think we do?
I think delivery report should be good.
Greg Carter with Champion School of Real Estate. I just have a question, because we tie this to pay, what happens if I do an inspection and I offer it an inspection for free? Do I not have this time frame? Or is it open-ended?
It's considered paid. I guess.
At zero?
Yeah. Yeah, if there is no payment, then you've got 2 days.
From the date you finish.
From the date you complete the inspection.
Yeah. I mean, does that make sense?
Oh, it makes perfect sense to me, but I just know that it's going to be coming up in relationship to the question.
Well, you wouldn't have any leg to stand on not delivering it if you're waiting for payment and there is no payment due.
Yeah.
Just saying, just telling you. As long as it's duly noted, it's coming.
Julian.
The wording,
What?
payment of the performance of the inspection. It's not saying completion. Everybody's saying completion at the table, but it's not saying completion.
What do you mean?
Well,
Performance?
Performance is you're performing the inspection, you could still be 2 days later have to perform something different or a re-inspection.
Well, that brings up the question of,
Re-inspection.
in the discussion had come up on some guys, I say guys, some inspectors do an inspection and maybe they show up and the water's not turned on. And they coordinate with the client, we're gonna have it on tomorrow, can you come back and finish the inspection tomorrow? Some look at it, like myself, is I'm inspecting, when I leave, the inspection is performed. You want me to come back, it's a re-inspection.
It's a supplemental.
Some will look at it as complete the inspection, it's a 2-day inspection. If it's a big, if I do a big multifamily, I may be there for days, so it's not, all inspections are not done on one calendar day. So I guess the question, performance, maybe, would be complete the inspection?
Completion of the inspection?
Or
Yeah,
what about
because-
upon receipt of payment and completion of the inspection?
Well,
Well,
the
the
first
payment
line.
is for completion.
Yes.
Right, or for the performance of it.
Yeah, so if some inspectors may look at that as an incomplete inspection, they're gonna come back the next day and complete the inspection, the 2 days starts at that point.
Well,
Does that make sense?
here's the other little caveat to that. What happens, same scenario, the water isn't on, you go in, and they take forever to get the water on, but based on what you found in that initial inspection, you send them the report, they back out. And they say, the inspection's not completed. At that
That's
point,
why
you do the
my
water.
position is always inspect.
That's the way I
When
look
I
at it.
drive away, the inspection is complete.
Right.
You know, if one or more of the utilities are not turned on, you're paying me to come back and re-inspect.
That's where
'cause
you
I've
do
already got that
inspect, not
time.
inspect your deficiency, what you're not.
No, you're right.
Completed on that.
I mean,
But the
so,
wording up there is saying performance is where I'm getting at. As we're trying to teach these guys, and they're gonna go, what do you mean? Because I would teach it as, once you're completed with the inspection and you've been paid, you got 2 days to deliver it. Because that's what the legal and ethics.
so is there a problem switching the word performance with completion of the inspection?
Well, it's connected to the payment. So in my mind, the question is, are you paying, is the client paying for the performance of the inspection or the completion of the inspection?
Well, they're
Right?
paying
That's all
for
one-
it, but the sentence is, the purpose of the sentence is to tie a 2-day timeline
I would like
to
to
the
ask
payment.
Mike
To the-
for legal on that question.
the
Right.
2-day
No, if I
timeline on
do
the
an
payment from
inspection
the
right,
completion of the
you're
inspection.
paying for a complete inspection.
Hey, hang on, on the phone, can you repeat that, please?
You know, when I go out to do an inspection on a house, right, and they call for a combination, just say combination inspection, a total inspection of the house, right? If it's not ready, when I go there, and there's a number of issues, I back out and say, you take care of all this, or if something's not ready, like water's not on, how can I check? I can't. So I have to come back the following day when there's the water pressure on the pipe. That's a re-inspection.
Correct.
Right.
Part of it is a business decision
So-
on whether or not you inspect without a utility and figure that's a completed inspection. it's just going to have a lot of not inspected components of it.
My problem is if we put completion, we're gonna have to define
You
completion.
guys, I think you guys are maybe looking at it in a vacuum too. You got to look at the whole rule together. So it says for each inspection, the inspector shall prepare an inspection report noting observed deficiencies and other required report, and upon. So I think taken in together, it addresses what your concerns are.
And maybe you flip it, maybe you say, prepare the inspection report, and 2, deliver the inspection report to the client within 2 days after receipt of payment for the inspection. You could take the word performance out if you want, unless otherwise agreed in writing. Then I think it flows better, right?
Because performance completion, it leaves too much. of
Right.
that.
I can see both words, it's just there's
Right.
gray area there.
And it's just,
But, and
So what are
some
we doing
inspectors have gotten in trouble
So
by
take that upon receipt
saying,
of
okay,
payment.
I'll come back
Take
tomorrow
that
and
out
finish
there.
the inspection,
Put that out there.
and tomorrow never
And then
comes.
after 2 days,
And after a week, they're like,
And
where's
before
my
you get
report?
to
Well,
after
where's my
days-
phone call that the utilities are on?
put it,
Okay.
before, unless, between days and
And
unless.
I condone,
Put it in
finish the
there,
inspection,
and then we're gonna cut it
give them a
down.
report with a bunch of non-inspected areas, you want me to come back and re-inspect for
We're
those?
gonna put upon receipt of
That's
payment
another inspection.
for the inspection, take the performance of the out.
Hold on.
Are we making this complicated?
No, I'm editing a PDF, so
And
it
it's really difficult.
becomes difficult.
You said for the inspections.
Copy and paste on the word.
Okay. Did I screw something up?
Yeah, you did. It should be between days and unless.
Yeah, you did. Yes, you did.
And then what do we do?
Upon receipt of payment for the inspection, take the performance of out.
Yes.
Yes.
And then the unless can stay.
And the unless can stay, correct. How's
So-
that? Is that better? Is that more clear?
Deliver the
Reading it in
inspection,
whole.
deliver the inspection report to the client within 2 days upon receipt of payment for the inspection unless otherwise agreed by the,
Maybe not upon then.
yeah.
The
In 2
performance
days
is gone.
of receipt of payment.
I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
Oh.
It's a PDF.
You're doing great, Tony.
Don't let them get you
I wonder why Adobe can compete with Word.
Okay.
Okay.
Does that work?
Does that feel better?
Does that make?
Does that feel
does that make you feel better? That's what you wanted to say, right?
Does that get to what you're
Why do we have to define client?
It's already defined.
Do what?
It's already defined by rule.
Okay, but I mean, why do we have it?
Why what?
Why do we have it in there?
Client?
No, person for whom the
Oh,
inspection.
It's not.
It's
We're
in
taking
red,
that out.
we're
We're
taking
taking
it
that
out.
out.
That's
Yeah.
existing language.
No, client's been defined. Person for whom the inspection was performed. Yeah, we're tying it back to a definition.
That's why
of
it's in
client.
red, because it's
Yeah.
taken out. Okay.
And it was stricken, but because of the PDF and moving it around, it looks
Okay.
different. But yeah, that's why I highlighted this, because I can't underline it, but whatever. So,
Gotta love PDFs.
I do.
I do.
Okay, everybody good with the verbiage that go around on agenda item 10? Any other questions on that? Okay, entertain a motion to approve 535.222 as amended.
I make motion that we approve 535.222 as amended.
Motion made by Mr. Moore, do I hear a second?
Second.
Hear a
I'll second it.
I'll second it.
There's a lot of seconds, all
I'll
right.
second it.
Can you guys, Mike, can you guys turn down just a little bit? Any other?
Are you okay?
She said aye. She voted for it.
Any other discussion on this item? All right, everybody, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, say no. Motion carries. Agenda item number 11, which we are postponing to the end. We'll move on to agenda item number 12. Discussion and possible action regarding awarding continuing education credit for attending any meeting of the full inspector committee. Who's this, Diana?
That was you, Jen. Yeah.
It was brought up by.
It was brought up at the last committee meeting to see
Oh.
what the impact might be to have someone sitting here counting CE hours for every inspector committee meeting rather than just the February one.
Well,
And we might
I mean, that's
adjust
easy enough to
February.
speak
We have to adjust
to.
it to January.
It's,
Oh, yeah, it'll be January, thank you.
right, so if you guys want to be able to offer CE credit for any of the full inspector committee meetings, that would just require a staff resource to man all of those meetings, attend them, and make sure that people are signing in and signing out. So it's doable. We already have the paperwork, but it will require an education staff person to attend every meeting.
And I would think you guys, maybe I'm speaking out of turn here, would want to limit the amount of CE you could get. Maybe just switch it to any meeting, but keep the CE limit to what it is currently.
Is the intent to try to increase involvement in these meetings?
It's to try to, waggle a carrot to get people to come to meetings. But
We have a limit.
currently have a limit. I'm just saying if you
2
open it up
hours per
to
year, right?
4.
It's 4 hours.
It's 4 hours.
per year or 4 per renewal?
Per renewal.
Yeah, so it's 2 per
year.
year. Yeah.
4 per renewal period. So you could open it up to any meeting, but maybe keep that limit on there so that people are, encouraged to do other types of CE.
Yeah, that was going to be my suggestion, so you don't try to get 8 hours.
Do we have the wording there?
I have to pull the rule up.
So we know we want to change the, if we didn't do anything, we still got to change the month.
Yeah, it would be true.
Based on,
Correct. Because we'd have to change it to January from February and
if the other changes go forward, yes. So
Sorry.
So that was actually going to be my suggestion.
Over that.
I don't mind opening that up from restriction from just being the February or January meeting to making it any meeting. But I don't necessarily want to see us bump the amount of possible hours from what they currently are per year.
because we still want those other systems.
You want the diversity in education.
So you'd have 32 hours, 8 hours MCE.
So here it is right here. G, continuing education credit for attendance at a meeting of the Texas Real Estate Inspector Committee. An inspector licensed in Texas may receive up to 4 hours of CE credit per license period for attendance in person at the February meeting of the Texas Real Estate Inspector Committee. So, does it say any?
We'd have to.
You'd take out the word February.
Yeah.
And it would put everything would want.
And it says up to 4 hours. That means however long you're actually at the meeting.
Per license,
Which isn't
yeah.
actually.
Well, it's 2 hours a year.
Well,
It's
actually, it
2
doesn't
hours.
specify that. It just says
You
4 per
could,
license.
you could go to a 4-hour meeting
And get credit for
once
those 4
every
hours.
2 years.
Yeah.
If
Which
it
if
was
you're
a
gonna sit around
4-hour
for
meeting,
4 hours,
we have,
I'll-
we
we
have had them. Not all the time, but.
But
What
I
I'm
think,
saying,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Is you only get, I mean, if you attend a 2-hour meeting or 1 hour meeting, you only get that much
right,
credit
correct.
for however long the meeting lasts.
Correct.
And I think Doyle was the one who brought this up as a possibility, so that's why we brought it forward. Because there was some consideration from other committee members that it might be.
Because sometimes we have like this meeting that's very substantial, and the one that was designated was mainly because we knew a lot of people will be there were voting. There may not be much going on.
Right.
I mean, so
Right.
to be able to float it around to ones that are
Something that
substantial.
interests them.
Well, look at the meeting that we had about the insurance and how many people were attending that because.
Right.
When we gotta move downstairs.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So just modifying it, keeping the limit, but modifying it to any of the meetings.
Just taking out in February and putting 8.
Yeah.
Doyle, did you want to add anything to that or your concerns?
No, my only real reason for bringing this up in the first place was, one, to allow us as inspectors who are contributing our volunteer time to these rule changes or whatever it is that comes across the commission, or the committee rather, an opportunity to gain a little bit of CEUs, but also really to drive other inspectors to participate in these meetings. Just by going to
That's a
one
good
meeting,
idea.
you've never gone to one meeting ever and there's an opportunity to get credits, you can learn how this process takes place, and that may help in the recruitment of committee member volunteers in the future, which has been difficult.
Yeah, and I really don't see any reason to restrict it to the January, February meeting, so. I think it's a good idea. Any other comments on this agenda item?
218? I don't think so.
Do we have a question?
Oh, it is, you're right. Yeah. We're actually going to be adding the ride-along to 218, thank you, Chelsea, in any way, so we can make this recommended change as part of that if the committee wants to take an action on it.
Okay.
Something they can do now.
Yeah, you just need a motion and a
Because some of
vote.
these go through the process, but some.
Just bring it
we can
forward.
say,
And I'm just going to clarify that credit for attending a real estate inspector committee meeting needs to be when they attend the entire presentation. We're not going to be looking at partial credit, right?
Right.
Nobody.
Full
The
meeting,
beginning
that's
to
always.
the end. of
Full
all
meeting.
It's a 6-hour meeting, you got to sit here for 6 hours and get your
Right.
4 hours of credit.
Dun, dun, dun.
Agreed.
thank you, Doyle.
All right, I would entertain a motion to make a modification to section 218, as we discussed.
Is
If
that-
anybody would like to make that?
Is that 218?
It is.
Yes.
I make a motion to modify 535-218 to allow continuing education for any inspector advisory committee meeting.
Full
It's-
inspection.
Yeah, without a change to the limit.
And it needs to be the full committee, not subcommittees.
Correct.
Full,
Yeah.
full committee, full inspector advisory committee meeting.
I'll second that, Barbara.
All right, so we have a motion, we have a second. Now, any discussion?
Does it need to be stated in there that you don't do a phone call? It's actually.
It's physical.
Physical
Yeah.
attendance.
The only ones who can attend where it counts for anything by phone call are committee members, and that's
Okay.
because that's statutory.
The current rules
Agreed.
in
I
person.
mean, there are people on the phone who aren't committee members, but that you have to sign up and get a roster and everything, because they're not here to get credit for it, they're not here to
Okay,
get credit
okay.
for it.
I was just asking if
Yeah,
that needed to
good
be.
question.
Yep.
Good
Yeah,
question.
it was.
No, Tony, I want my credit.
Well, you get it anyway because you're a committee member.
I didn't get no credit for this.
You got it.
We'll renew your license.
Yes.
For a fee.
Thank you.
I'll put you in for a pay raise, how about that?
That's what I want.
Ooh, I like that one.
Any other
Expensive.
any other discussion on this item? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed, say no. All right, motion passes. Number 13, request for future meeting agenda items. Do we have anybody who would like a item to go on a future agenda? Obviously, we're going to bring back, these rules, make them
Right.
back again. But
Right.
I don't see anything that we discussed here that we need to come back. I mean, we've hashed out all the things we're doing here.
Well, what would come back would be if there's any comments.
Well,
With the comment period.
but
So
I
you
mean-
always consider the comments on rules
Well,
that are proposed.
another round.
We will
Yeah.
bring them forward, and if there's no comments, we'll just say there were no comments on them. If there were comments, then you address the comments, whether or not you want to make changes based on those or not.
But there weren't anything we left undone that we have to go back out and work on.
I don't think so.
Okay, I don't know if this is the place for this, but it's a
We'll find out.
question I brought up to Steve and maybe Tony. I've tried to get a friend license as an apprentice. Short story. Due to an issue that he had when he was 19 years old, a legal thing, which was 44 years ago. And jumping through all these hoops trying to find paperwork, he finally gave up. Can we, at some point, discuss a quote-unquote statute of limitations or something? I mean, why does it matter what happened 44 years ago?
On criminal offenses for election?
If he's lived a
I mean, there's
unblemished life since.
either of you want to speak to that, or?
You want to? You want me to?
This is chapter 53.
Yeah,
We
we
don't-
we have a rule for all license holders on criminal background and what if it falls within a certain category, then we can deny a license, but then in that same rule, and this is all based, as Mike said, on the statute that, chapter 53 of the occupations code that applies to all occupational license, there's mitigating factors. The length of time is one of them. Employment, letters from people who know him, all that stuff. So my guess would be, unless he was an axe murderer on on an inspection or a plumbing job or something, I can't imagine where the mitigating circumstances in the past 44 years of the time and everything wouldn't negate that. But he just didn't go through the hoops. Now, we do have something called a moral character determination. That's for $50. You just send it in and they'll tell you before you even do any of the other stuff.
Well, yeah, and it was a DUI.
Yeah,
and
that.
the fact that he had to go through and try to get certified copies of this and that for something that long ago just
Well, we don't
seemed-
ask for certified copies. We do ask for copies, but if copies have been destroyed by the court, the district clerk, just a letter saying those records don't exist is
Right.
sufficient enough.
So maybe, I don't know who he talked to, but it sounds like it's that we have a process in place and it shouldn't be that hard.
It's hard enough that he finally gave
Maybe
up.
it was, and maybe the person on the phone misunderstood, or he misunderstood what he was required to get.
Well, he kept getting paperwork saying, well, now we need this, now we need this.
Okay.
Is there a place on Trek's website that would lay out that information?
There is.
Or the policies?
Well, there's information about moral character determination, and then, I think it points to our rule, 541.1. But that's something, if you want to give his name to Mike, Mike can take it back to his division director, and they can kind of look and see what the issue was. If the paperwork just was missent, or there was miscommunication, but in that instance, I can't imagine that would count against him.
I just thought it was
Yeah, no, it
pointless
does.
for something that long ago that
Yeah.
we even cared.
Yeah, there's no set statute of limitations.
And we've seen some orders that look like they were created just to approve somebody's license that had an offense. Are there
Right,
some-
because you have to show the mitigating circumstances, and so.
So, going through, like I was going through the 58 enforcement orders that were in the last 2-year renewal, there were at least 2 of them, I think, in there that were created. The enforcement order was created just to allow somebody to get a license that
Right.
had an
It
offense.
was a probation, it was a probationary license.
Probationary license.
But those aren't included on the enforcement report anymore because technically they're not disciplined.
Yeah, they weren't doing anything. They're getting.
So
they're getting
we felt it wasn't, that record's out there forever. And for people that go through the disciplinary process or go get a probationary license, that order and that information's actually removed from our website once they complete their probationary basis. Though these things are out there forever, so then that person's, people stigmatized for, they're punished for something that they're not really technically being punished.
Well, I was saying there are applicants that have gotten approval with some pretty
I did
significant
one about
offenses.
2 months ago, so.
Yeah, I just think there was some miscommunication somewhere in this process.
It does happen.
This is a conversation that's happening across Texas with a lot of different types of licenses, just the challenges for those with any sort of pass to get those licenses and all the different hoops to go through. I know the legislature talks about it, makes changes to that code very regularly. It's meant to become easier, but
Anytime you have an offense
it's
that
hard.
makes someone nervous about you going into somebody's home.
Right.
Is like plumbers that go into homes, electricians, inspectors.
That's really what the whole criminal background check is for people who are interacting with the public or going into someone's property. I don't think it's,
We're going into people's home unattended.
Yeah, it's a lot of times by themselves.
You have fraud issues.
Yeah.
Like so.
But the driving
But the
thing,
reality is,
without-
unfortunately, there's a part of the occupations code that governs all licensing entities that we don't have anything.
And you gotta jump through hoops.
Yeah.
But
They can be done.
It can be done.
Yeah.
It can be done.
Humiliating.
Yep.
All right, any other items for future meetings? Hearing none? No.
I was going to say, any reason for subcommittees to be scheduled?
Well-
Other than the SOP already said they're working on things. Anything on the education or enforcement that needs to be done before the next?
I mean, we likely, if there's comments on this rule, probably might want to vet them first to the education subcommittee, just to get, kind of iron that out before you bring it to the full committee. Yeah.
So we're kind of on call.
Right.
Okay.
To be determined.
Yeah. Okay. Do you have a schedule? I forgot to.
So item number 14, discussion of future meeting dates.
So we are now on a fairly, we're trying to make sure we're providing information to our policymakers as effortlessly as possible. So we have developed a meeting schedule.
Well, actually, the commission approved a meeting schedule for committees, and this was, and I'll try and pull it up, and this was for consistency and reliability
Right.
for commission members to know when the meetings were, and for committee members to set their schedules way ahead of time. So for inspectors, it's pretty much what you've been doing, and it'll be the third Monday of every October, January, July, what am I missing? April, and July.
So,
if you have to have something at another time for whatever reason, you
right.
can.
It doesn't preclude you from meeting more often than that, but this is so that we can get all the materials available for the
commission
Review, because a lot of times these meetings have pushed right up to the edge and then they have to
Right.
supplement. So,
So with that, theory, our next meeting will be July 15th.
yes. That is the third Monday. Because ESAC is the second Monday. You guys are the third Monday.
And there will likely be an SOP subcommittee meeting at some point before the next in the next quarter, and obviously
Yes, that's correct.
an education subcommittee.
Tony, do you want to schedule those now while we've got everyone around, or do you want to do that by email?
If Doyle, if you want to send me an email, I can send something out to the subcommittee members after this, and we can pinpoint a date at that point. Just to remind me.
Sounds good. Thank you. You got it.
Thank you, sir.
As we get closer to October, I already know I'm going to be gone there for money in October, so we might be able to adjust that in some way, shape, or form. That'd be great.
In October? Look this way.
Yes, that's great.
You can ask Carrie. Carrie's
Sorry.
got one foot on.
Lee, you can have whatever you want.
Don't tell me that.
Sorry.
She's got one foot off the door,
I
and one
do,
on the banana peel.
18 days. Okay, so next meeting here, July 15th, 10 a.m. start. Seems to work for everybody. Okay. So at this point, we need to go into executive session, correct?
Yes. And you need to announce why.
Yeah. Need to go into executive session to discuss agenda item number 11, discussion of possible action regarding updates to the 4-hour inspector legal update continuing education course.
Right.
And then that would be at 12:18 p.m.
So for those committee members on the phone, we're going to hang up and you'll dial in on.
We will now reconvene back into open session at 1:45. And then need a motion.
Do we have to hang up and call back that other number?
No.
Oh, actually, you need to take your vote. You need to make the motion, take your vote in open
We didn't
session.
vote for this.
So the motion that we you need to take that actually in open session.
Ah.
So Steve, will you make your motion?
I think I have it.
Chelsea, you want to help him?
I think you want to do it?
Let me say this. I'd like to make a motion that we accept the changes as presented for the 4-hour legal and update continuing education course and allow the education subcommittee to answer the discussion questions.
And approve any additional changes.
And improve any additional changes to the course.
Motion made, second.
I seconded
Mr.
again.
Morgan, second. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no.
Aye.
Aye.
Quick on that one. Motion carries.
You're hungry.
I hate to print the bags.
I was sneaky fasting.
You motion to adjourn, or
I need
did
a
you just
motion.
call?
Oh, you just adjourn at whatever time.
Meeting adjourned at 1:46.